All right, welcome to my Bible app class. This week we're in our second week of the Miracle of Mercy study that we're going through as a church-wide study. So welcome everybody who's here in class today and who's watching us online. I want to start off with getting feedback from last week. I want to know what you guys got out of that. What anything meaningful? Anything? Did legions of angels come down into heaven and bright lights in your bedroom one night and you were awake with the choir of God giving you all this insight and stuff? Did that happen? What kind of thing went on with you guys for last week? If you wish. That'd be nice. Yeah, too much pizza, I think, is what usually causes that. But anyone? Nobody got anything out of last week? All right, well then let's move on to this week. Okay, Joan, she has something.
Well, yesterday I went to Albertsons, and normally I have my list, and I get through as quick as I can. But this time, I took my time to say something to the people that I was passing or, trying to run over or whatever.
Right.
It was a joy to talk with strangers, and they were glad to have someone say hi and how are you and how your day going and so forth. Yeah. It was really neat.
So it's good. It's good to interact and takes it slow down a little bit and just chat with people. That's good. Last week was pretty much just an overview for the series. We looked at the 5 marks of mercy that's put out in this study, and so basically that was the overview. Now we're going to start on the first mark this week, and next week we'll do the second mark and so on until we get to the end. That's where we're headed. But I want to ask you guys, last week I asked the question, what is mercy? We talked about the idea of mercy and what that's all about. This week I want to ask you, what is forgiveness? Who could tell me what forgiveness is? Don't all jump at once. Everybody can have a turn. Mary?
Letting go of a wrong that's been done to you, or that you perceive as a wrong done to you.
Letting go. Okay, anybody else?
Turning it over to God.
Turning it over to God. Okay. Any other ideas?
At the end of the lesson.
Well, what did you get from that? All righty then.
Mostly it was when you forgive, you're letting go and then you're free.
Letting go, you're free.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is for you. Not for the person who offended you.
Bless you, my daughter.
Okay. Any other ideas? Loretta?
Canceling a debt.
Canceling a debt. Okay. Anybody else?
Praying for the person who hurt you. That's part of forgiveness.
Praying for the one who's hurt. Okay.
I think basically it's after the will. As Corey Ten Bloom would say, I decided to forgive the people that helped me.
Be a process, not a one-time quick fix.
Okay. Forgiveness is
You
a
might have to
process.
do it over and over.
All right. Okay. Well, these are all good ideas. I think most of them have something to do with forgiveness. Let's see. This one right here is an actual definition, the literal definition for forgiveness. But all of this right here, except for this literal definition, the rest of this is all nice, but quite frankly, I think that it's difficult, it's impractical, it's something that, as I have worked with people over the years and in my own life, have found very, very difficult, if not impossible, to actually do. Especially these two right here. I think this is nothing more than what I call Christianese or God talk. It sounds really good. You can't find it in Scripture anywhere. No instruction from God or the apostles on it. Quite frankly, if you ask anybody, how do you go about doing these two things? I've never been able to get anybody to find an answer. They hem and haw, they try to do, they say some of this, some of this. But the reality of the situation is that in practical everyday life, forgiveness is one of the most difficult things to do and get our head around, and that's why everybody comes up with a whole list of stuff. Okay? So, out of these things, if we're going to go with something, I would go with this because it's the literal definition. It's canceling the debt. And so that's good. But if you know me for any length of time, you know that I am not a guy that just simply sits on my laurels and goes, oh, that's good, cancel the debt. Amen, brother. Let's go on back to the house. Have some lunch. Not going to work for me. Because the very next question out of my mouth when I read a definition like canceling a debt is, show me how that's done. Because that person really did some destructive stuff. Now, if you want to talk to me about canceling a debt in context of accounting, then there's a formula for that, right? But if you want to talk to me about canceling a debt in terms of this intangible relationship thing, there's no formula for that, really, that most people are aware of. There is, but most people don't know about it. So I'm looking for more of a practice. This all sounds really, and by the way, if you're forgiving someone, I think that you are in a position where you're able to pray for them. I think this is not so much forgiveness as much as this is it's a bellwether or a barometer that can give you some feedback on whether or not you've actually successfully forgiven somebody. Because if you have not, you're not going to be able to pray for them. Guaranteed. Not genuinely, anyway. Okay? So that's a pretty good bellwether for forgiveness, I think. I think that an act of the will, I think, is a good expression of, meaning that it's a choice to forgive. I agree that that's true, but just because somebody has the choice doesn't necessarily mean they'll exercise it. So it is an act. I mean, it's something that you participate in, so that's good. But I mean, let's face it, guys. What's the practical application of forgiveness? And what's the formula to make sure that that's really happening in one's life? Well, the answer to that is really involved. Okay? And we're not going to have time to get through all that today or even in this series. But what we will do is look at a practical formula, and then I'm going to give you a prompt or a shameless plug for the series we're going to start after this. Because the series we start after this one is going to get into this into great depth. I'm going to teach you guys how to effectively forgive people in your life. Okay? Let me say this, and you might want to jot this down if you have something to write on. I believe very strongly, and it's based on my experience, not just some theory I have, in my own life, in the lives of people that I've counseled, in the lives of friends and family that I've watched, and people that I've interviewed, talked to, and taught over the years. You are never going to be able to effectively forgive anybody unless you are sure and understand how to forgive you. Okay? It's great that God forgave you and He's given you all this forgiveness, but you are not going to pass that on to anybody else until you know how to do it for you first. That's the number one thing about forgiveness. So, you know, it's back to the old idea that you need to pull the beam out of your eye before you pull the speck out of somebody else's. You got to clean up your own house, or you're never going to be able to clean up in the houses of others as it relates to you and your relationship with them. Does that make sense? Okay. We're not going to figure all that out today, because the next question becomes, well, how do I forgive myself? Okay? Which we're going to do that, okay? So I hope you guys stick with us for the next several months, because we're going to be going through this stuff in great detail, okay? I want to turn your attention to the formula that I want to give you before we start filling out the handout or the blanks in the book, because I want you to have this understanding as we're going through this. Luke 23:34 is the formula. It's the only formula that I found that's this stark and this blatant and this right in your face. But it gets overlooked so much. My father was the one who pointed this out, and he's coined a term around it, which I'm going to write down for you in a moment. But first I want to read the verse, okay? So whoever gets there first, the sword drill. Boom, read it.
And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. And they divided his garments and cast lots.
So Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. How many of you are familiar with that verse? How many of you know that that right there is the practical, everyday formula for forgiveness? Here's why. Write this down. This ink is not going to make it. So, thinking, forgiveness is becoming more concerned for the needs of the offender than what they have done to offend me. Becoming more concerned for the needs of the offender than what they have done to offend me. This is precisely what Jesus was practicing as he made that statement. Father, forgive them. Jesus is hanging on the cross, bloody and beaten and unrecognizable. And where was his concern and his focus at that moment? On the needs of everyone around him. The need for their salvation. The need for their healing. The need for their eternal security. He was not offended by what they had done to him. Was what they had done to him offensive? Of course it was. It was horrifically offensive. Offensive on a level you and I will never begin to understand. Our sin that he took on and became on our behalf, was that offensive? Horribly offensive. On a level you and I will never begin to understand. And yet, his whole focus during the entire time was on them and their needs. The ones that were offending him, including us, he was more concerned about them and what they needed than what they were doing to him. Now, guys, I can't think, and I've looked, believe me, I can't find and I can't come up with a better, practical, daily application of forgiveness than that. But here's what it requires. This is where you got to get in. This is where the coming months are going to help us learn how to practically apply this. Because it requires you to be in a place where you are at peace with yourself. You've got to be able to be clear of conscience with yourself. If you're attempting to forgive other people, you've got all this junk going on inside you that you haven't resolved yet, you're not going to do it. It's going to fail time and time again. So, I'm going to take an opposition point, big surprise, that forgiveness is not for you. I don't agree with that at all. Jesus did not forgive us for his own sake. That's not why he did it. At least I can't find any scripture that says that. God forgave us for us. It was for our benefit that he forgave us. And if you are going to practice forgiveness the way God has given us an example, then this is not about you. This is about them. Whether this lady, we saw the video of her today or not, whether she realizes it, or not, I think, based on what I saw, that she was practicing this right here. She'd become concerned for this young man in prison, whatever his needs were, whatever drove him to that point. That's what became important to her. It was important to her that she have some reconciliation with him, that someone reach out to him and offer something that can bring him back from where he was at. That was all about him. Now, did she benefit from that? Sure she did. Huge. Do you benefit from being more concerned about the need of the offender than what they've done to offend you? Of course you do. That's not the motive. The motive is not about me. Guys, if we haven't figured that out by now in this class, this whole thing that we believe in, that the God of the universe has given to us, is not about us. Right? It is about us, but it's not about us. It's all about serving others, loving others, giving to others. It's all about others, others, others. And do others benefit from that? Of course they do. Do we benefit from that? Of course we do. It's a win-win situation. Right? The story that was told also today about the woman who was brutally raped and murdered, right? And the husband, is he practicing a concern for their need? Absolutely he was. That's why he was able to forgive that way. I read a book one time and I met this man who wrote the book, and his son was brutally murdered while he was delivering a pizza one time. And the person that murdered him was a gangbanger who was being initiated into the gang. And he was supposed to rob this guy and kill him. And that's what he did. He robbed this branch, just randomly picked somebody. Kid was delivering, college kid, doing great. You know, he was a clean kid, had great grades, was going somewhere in life, delivering pizzas at night, helping pay for college. And he just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. Got out to deliver the pizza, got jumped by this guy, pulled a gun, shot him, left the pizza, took the money, but that was it. It was a gang initiated. The grandfather, they caught the kid, they prosecuted and went to prison. The kid was living with his grandfather. He had no parents. His grandfather was raising him. The dad of the murder victim, of course, through all the trial and everything, introduced himself and got to know his grandfather, and the two of them came together and formed a relationship. The father had worked through and forgiven this young man who killed his son. And they developed, they put together a nonprofit organization around all of this to reach out to other victims and so on. At the end of the day, what made that work was this father was more concerned about the need of the young man who killed his son than he was concerned about the fact that his son had been murdered. And all kinds of great things came out of that. Guys, that's forgiveness. To me, that beats all of this combined. That's power. This is ideas. This is practical application right here day to day, in my opinion. All right? So I want you to keep that in mind as we go through this filling, fill out these blanks, okay? All right. So if you go to page 36 of your book, and if you miss anything, go online. This will be on the website. You guys can get your answers there. All right. So, of course, this starts off with Peter coming to Jesus and asking how many times are we to forgive. We all know that story, right? 70 times 7 is the answer that Jesus gives. So, there's 3 reasons I must learn to give. The first reason is because God has forgiven me. Number 1, God has forgiven me. Now, this is a... All right. Matthew chapter 18 is the story here. It's the parable of the unforgiving servant, right? And this is the story where the guy goes, the king calls in the servant and says, "Yeah, you owe me a lot of money." And translate that to today's dollars, it's excess of $10 million. That's what you owe me, and I want you to pay me right now. I don't have the money. So the king says, okay, I'm going to go ahead and not only not put you in prison and not impose all these other things against you, but I'm going to instead let you go, and I'm going to wipe your debt clean so you don't owe me anything. The guy turns right around, he goes to somebody who owes him money, which was an equivalent of like $15 or something, and beats on this guy to give him the money. The guy doesn't have it, so he has the guy thrown in prison, debtor's prison. The king gets wind of this and says, that's ridiculous. I gave you all that debt that you owed me, and you told this to somebody else who will do even less. Not only am I going to throw you in prison, but I'm going to have you tortured now. Okay. This is intense stuff. And given this, what does that give us an idea of? What gets into our heads? And if I don't, then what? Yeah, then God's going to get me now, right?
The jailers get you.
Yeah, so I have a tough time with this one because I don't think that that's the case.
Well, Dwayne,
we have the story.
The story is that the jailers did the tormenting, not the king.
Not the king.
There's a difference there. So God does not torment you, but He lets you be tormented because you won't forgive people. There's a significant difference in those two.
That's a very good point. That's very good.
Dwayne,
Yes.
however, when you look at the Lord's Prayer, what? And forgive me, as I have forgiven the debtors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a reference to the prayer.
It's a reference to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing that I want to thwart, okay? It's the idea, and it happened. My son, he even said to me in church this morning as we were sitting there, and he was drawing, like he's not paying attention to anything that's going on. He suddenly looks at me and goes, Dad, that's not true. I said, what do you mean, what's not true? That God's not going to forgive us? God always forgives us. Okay, son, we'll talk about that on the way home. Ooh, okay, cool. I don't get it. I thought he wasn't listening. So, what I want to do with this is I want to be careful. Okay, God has forgiven me. But just because God has forgiven me doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be willing to forgive others, right? We all agree to that? Okay. Because God has forgiven me, does it give me the opportunity or the ability to forgive others? Certainly it does, right? Because of who He made us to be. And now, not only are we love, joy, peace, and so on, but we're also forgiveness. We are mercy. We are forgiveness. It's not just something we do. It is who we are. And out of that comes the activities of mercy and forgiveness and so on. Alright? But when we get into this idea that, hey, if you don't do something God's way, that God is then going to retaliate against you, I reject this ideology, this theology big time. Okay? And that's exactly what's being, it's not being directly stated, but there's this overtone. And I just want to be cautious of that. If any of you have that concern in your mind, don't have that concern. Okay? We also have to keep in mind, well, why did Jesus say it then? Okay. Let me answer that real quick, because that's inevitably somebody has that question in their mind. There's a distinction in time when the old covenant came to a close and God gave us a new covenant. Okay? Christ speaks in the Gospels, he was still under the old covenant. The new covenant has not happened yet. The time of the new covenant begins at what point? At the cross. Okay? So, first and foremost, I understand when Christ first had his ministry to the Jewish people. Okay? Jesus had not gone to the uttermost parts of the world. Jesus had not gone to all of the Gentiles and so on. He was there for the Jews, and he was teaching them, you're the Messiah that's been prophesied. He tells these parables, and he tells these stories, and he gives these instructions, and he gives these samples of prayer and so on. And everything, I believe, everything that Jesus said had one primary goal. What do you think that primary goal was? Well, yeah, that was the ultimate target, but what was the goal? What was the purpose of everything he said and did?
What did John say?
Oh, what did John say? Oh, us. We were the goal. We were the goal. I agree. We were the target. It was all done for us. But I'm looking for something more specific, though.
When was love?
Yeah, it was out of love.
Serve others.
Yes, he was serving others. Christ had a mission. What was his mission?
Reconcile us to God.
Reconcile us to the Father. Okay, so that's all about salvation. Jesus' entire purpose for coming to this earth was to die on the cross for our sins, was it not? So his entire message was about what? Salvation. I'm here, I'm going to die, you're going to need to believe in me, or, as he talked about, the branches are cut off. That was the Jewish people he was referring to. You guys are sons now, but when I die, you're going to have to believe and accept me as that Savior, not the law. That won't save you. That was his primary message. Now, can we get other benefits out of what Jesus taught in the parables he told, practical daily living, advice, things like that? Sure we can. But that wasn't his goal. That wasn't the primary target. The primary target was to point the way. You're a sinner in need of a Savior. I'm that guy. Simple, right? These stories are all about that. That's what they're all about. Okay, so it is true under the law that if you're not forgiving others, God is not forgiving you. You have to go and clean up your mess if you understand the law. If you have a problem with somebody, if you have an issue with somebody, you have to go and clean up that mess and reconcile with that person before you come and give your sacrifice. Did you know that? Otherwise, God would reject the sacrifice. That's what he's talking about here. Under the new covenant, that's not the case. The veil was torn. We get access to the inner sanctum. The sacrifice is no longer necessary, as Hebrews aptly points out. So it's not the same anymore under the new covenant as it was under the old covenant. God is not going to reject your sacrifice. Why is that?
Because all sins are forgiven.
Because Christ is the ultimate sacrifice. Right? Not rejected on your behalf. Okay. So it's very, very important we understand. Okay, so God has forgiven me. This is I believe, a good motivation to forgive other people. However, unless you're in a place where I still think that principally things apply. In other words, if I got issues with someone who's hurt me, and I haven't resolved those issues within myself first, I'm never going to be able to extend that forgiveness to them. Does that make sense? There's a principle in that, I think, that applies to us today. What I'm not concerned about is whether or not God's going to forgive me or not forgive me. I'm already forgiven. It's already a done deal. So it's not even a question of is he going to. The reality is he already has. Does that make sense? All right. So let's say again.
All you have to do is accept it.
That's exactly right. So let's keep that in mind as we go through this one, okay? And we look at that story. The second reason he says we are to forgive is because resentment makes me miserable. Resentment makes me miserable. Okay, he points out here, if you look at the bottom paragraph before the next blank line, the torture chamber of unforgiveness is self-imposed. When we fail to forgive, God doesn't have to lock us up in jail. We do it to ourselves. We lock ourselves in a jail of anger and anxiety. And I think that's a good statement, too. It's definitely the case. We're going to get into resentment. Resentment is the manifestation of bitterness. So when you have resentment in your life towards another person, you're not able to forgive them. James asked this question: does sweet water and bitter water flow through the same fountain? What's the answer to that? No, you can't have both. One will overwhelm the other. So if you have resentments and bitterness towards other people because of things they've done to hurt you, you're not going to be able to forgive them. You're going to have to get rid of all that resentment first. Well, how do you do that, Dwayne? That's what this next series is going to focus on and teach. But it's a true statement. You can't have it both ways. You got to clean up this in here before you can extend that out to there. How can I be concerned for the needs of the offender when I resent everything that they do and stand for? And you know what, Cindy, the story you told me on the way in the door this morning about your brother, I think that is fantastic that you guys have come to that place in your relationship where you basically said, we're not going to focus on the things we disagree on because the relationship is more important to us. That's fantastic because it keeps this resentment out. But a lot of times people can't do that because they look at that other side and they go, everything that you believe in is so heinous to me. It is so offensive to me that I can't accept you. Does that make sense? My mother was sexually abused by my grandfather when she was a child, from ages 8 to 12. Public knowledge, so don't worry about anything my mother would be concerned about. We had a counseling ministry, our family, for over 25 years. So that information and pretty much everything else about our lives was put out there to just help people know, hey, we've been through it. We know how it works. We know how to get free from this stuff. My daughters, my 2 oldest daughters, to this day, cannot understand how we do not, my mother in particular, but myself, other members of our family don't hate him. He's been dead for a long time. But you guys still associated with him. You guys still, we went and visited Grandma and Grandpa, and we went and, spent time with them at their home, and we interacted, and we didn't shun this guy and push him out. How is that even possible? They're so offended by what he did that they can't see past it. And despite all my attempts to explain, what are you going to? The guy was also a World War II hero. He was part of he was a POW in a Japanese camp for 3 years, and tortured. And you can't believe the kind of torture and horrific things those men went through. Right? He's got the Purple Heart. He's got all these, And which one do you focus on? You focus on the great things this guy did and for his country and went through, or you focus on all the heinous, horrific, horrible things that he's done? You can't even balance that out. How do you choose? You can't justify what he did. And you can't say, well, this great thing cancels out this bad thing. That's not true either. But you know what you can do? You can become more concerned for the need of the offender than what he did that was offensive. You can do that. But you got to get rid of this first in order to make this happen. You see what I mean?
But it's totally supernatural. So it's just beyond us.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's the awesomeness of our identity. Mary?
Well, now this is me.
Okay.
In the Bible, we're never told that we're supposed to forget. We're just told to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see forgiving this person or any other person that has offended me. However, I would not trust him with my child.
Sure.
And
We're going to get to that one in a moment.
That would be the boundary.
Yeah. We're going to get to that one in a moment. And I have a story about that too. Okay. The third one is, I will need forgiveness. Okay. Again, to me, this implies that if I don't forgive, I won't get forgiveness. Okay, principally I agree that in relationships with other human beings, if I'm unforgiving to you, it's not likely when my turn, when I need forgiveness, that you're going to be forgiving to me. Now, you're probably a much bigger person than I am, and you're above that, and you would be forgiving to me even if I'm not forgiving to you. But as a general rule, amongst human beings, when we are not forgiving to others, when it's our turn and we need forgiveness, they're not going to be forgiving to us. So I think this is a very important point in that, but I'm cautious with it. I bring that point with a warning. This isn't about you. If your motivation is, well, I better forgive them because sooner or later I'm going to need them to forgive me. Okay, it's not about this anymore. Who's it about now? Now it's conditional, and now we're negotiating, and it doesn't work. I think you're just, if this is a motivation, then you have secondary and ulterior motives, and it's not going to be pure, and it's not going to happen. So, but I do believe that there is value in the idea that, hey, forgive other people because you are going to need forgiveness at some point, and generally people are not going to be forgiving if you're not forgiving. But we want to motivate that in others.
How about just have the mindset for you because the right.
Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, that's exactly why people don't do that well. That's why they need these things. It makes me feel good, and I'm going to need forgiveness, and it's all about me. And when I'm feeling good about everything, then it gives me a motivation, and I'm more likely to forgive. See, I don't do that. I don't live that way. I understand a lot of people do, and I'm not going to criticize them if that's going to be their reasons for doing stuff. But, you know, my son's like, but Dad, why? Because, son, it's the right thing to do. That's it. I don't have any other ulterior motive for you. I can't explain it to you any better than that. It's just right. That's it. Why would Christ come down out of heaven and give up everything to become this lowly human and to be tortured and die? He had no reason outside of it's just the right thing. They need this. That's why. That's pretty good motivation. And I'm not saying that's an easy motivation. I struggle a lot with that motivation. Do it, Dwayne, but I don't want to do it. I don't have a good reason to do it. Yeah, you do. It's right. That's why you do it. It's the righteous thing. So, if you can't get there and you need this, then use this. Because sometimes it's baby steps. So if you need that to help you get a little closer, then go for it. Use that. But make the ultimate goal this. This is my motivation. You know what? I'm concerned for that person. That's why I'm doing this. Yes, I know they're irritating. I know it's hard too much. I know they just go on and on about ridiculous things don't matter. And they don't understand that nobody cares. They're making a big deal, a mountain out of a molehill. And I hate all that too. But guess what? They're a human being and they have a need. And if I can help meet that need, then that's what I'm here for. And if I have to suffer through listening to that whatever again, or if I have to put up with that nasty attitude or horrible, then I'll do it. My mother's a saint. My grandmother was not. Actually, they're both saints because they're both perfect children of the living God. But my mother practices that in a much different way than my grandmother did. And my grandmother was just not a happy woman. And you could tell. She didn't try to hide it. But, and she was particularly mean to my mother. But my mother had been diagnosed with tuberculosis when she was a child, and she was going to die. And my grandmother convinced the authorities, instead of putting her in an asylum, to die and let her die at home. But she didn't nurse my mother back to health. And so, you know, my mother's 72 years old, 21 years old now, right? So because of my grandmother, my mother's here, and I'm here, and you know. So there's awesome things my mother did. There's my grandmother did. And there's a whole lot of horrible things my grandmother did too, right? And so again, where are we going to play out? Are we going to focus on what she did that was good, or focus on bad? Does one outweigh the other? No. But my mother, when it came time for my grandmother, when she began failing and getting older and couldn't remember anymore and all those things, my mother was the one who was there and took care of her. My mother, and it was motivated huge out of my mother gave me my life twice, you know, essentially, and I'm going to be here for her. And my grandmother was mean and nasty and hateful and ugly, and especially the more she got into her dementia, it just got worse and worse. And my mother she would leave sometimes and just cry. She would drive for an hour back to her house and just cry, you know, it was horrible. And I helped a lot with my grandmother, so I was there with my mom for all that. I watched that. My mother was so much more concerned for my grandmother's need than the offensiveness that my grandmother was spewing out of her. That's forgiveness. It didn't feel good. And when my mother needed forgiveness, it didn't always happen. This motivation didn't get her through. See what I mean? So, it was the right thing to do. That's what she did. Those motivations are pure, and they're the ones that work the best. And I know they're difficult to get to, but they're important. Okay, the next one is what we've already got up here. Leave it to God. Leave it to God. Okay, this is referencing the, what he gives a point here, he qualifies this with giving up, and I kind of like this, giving up my right to get even. That's the first line, okay? That leave it to God is the first line, but the note there on that one is giving up my right to get even. What he's pointing out is the passage, sorry, got distracted here. Pointing out the passage where God says that, leave it to me to get revenge. That's not your deal, that's my deal. And it's so hard. The degree of difficulty to not exercise that revenge when we want to is very difficult. Very, very difficult. Okay, and then the second part of that line is heal. With grace and mercy. And then the last one is similar to this one here. Nail it to the cross. See, guys, I gotta be honest. Stuff like that to me, I don't even know how to do that. Right? I don't want to be critical of Rick Warren, but I don't know how. I can't nail anything to the cross. I don't even understand how that works. I just don't even know. Christ is the one that took care of all that. I can't even come close to doing anything like that. So I don't even know how to approach this one. But that's what's in the book. So, I would like to turn my attention here to this one, because this is something I can practically be involved in with Christ. This I can't. I don't know how to even get involved in it. Heal it with grace and mercy. That's, Cindy made a great point. That's just so supernatural. Right? It's God's grace and it's God's mercy that's going to heal this stuff, not me. I can't do that. What I can do is position myself for Him to live that through me. I can do that.
Well, those other ones are performance things. That's like you're doing it. If I nail it to the cross, or if I
Well,
give it to God, I did something, and you've got to take yourself out of the equation. That's all. Performance.
Yeah, it's Susan.
The difference between letting God live through you rather than you living for Christ allows you to supernaturally come to that point.
Yes, that's exactly right. This is all in unison with the Lord. Bye, Renee. Have a good week. There's nothing that without Christ, nothing's possible, right? You're never going to be able to say, okay, Lord, don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to go nail this to the cross. Can't even fathom how that didn't make sense to me. Look, you were nailed to the cross. Because that happened, and because I've accepted the gift of eternal life, now you and I are one. And you can take the work of the cross and use it through me to work into the relationships of the lives of the people that I'm interacting with. Now that makes total sense. That I can work with. Because now I'm cooperating with Christ. I'm choosing to focus on what is the poor Ron. Ron's had a rough life. Right? Ron's done his best with what he's had to work with, all those things. And yet he's failed anyway. And when he failed, he damaged something in my life. So now I have choices. I can be angry with him, and I can hate him for it. And I can have this resentment. And, quite frankly, when all the rest of us would look at it, we might all go, yeah, Dwayne, you have the right to do that. I would be too. What Ron did was terrible. Okay, fine, so we all justify that. Now what? See, that's where everybody gets to and they get stuck. Okay, we've gone over and over and over what terrible thing happened. We've gone over and over and over how it's affected you. Okay, we got all that. Now what? And we get stuck. So we're told, well, you got to let go and let God. Okay, let go of what and let God what? What are you talking about? Well, let go of the resentment. Okay, but how? Do you understand the pain that I'm in right now? Do you understand the devastation of my life?
It always worked for me to say what goes around comes around.
That'll settle that up.
Yeah, okay. So we're canceling debts.
I mean, you know, God's gonna take care of it for you. You don't have to worry about it.
Here's the thing. Has God forgiven Ron for whatever that thing was?
Yeah.
Sure he did. Okay, so now it's wrong for me not to forgive him, but yet you can understand why I wouldn't, right? Given the heinous thing Ron did. Poor Ron.
But there are some people who might feel that way.
That's exactly right. That's real life. I guarantee you there are people in Dwayne's life, if you look far enough back, well, maybe not that far back, I guarantee you're going to find people that are going to go, Dwayne, that story no good. Whatever. You're not going to get a good story about Dwayne, I guarantee you. Okay? So that's happening. But here's the deal. If I can come to the point where I can say, look, it was terrible what he did, but guess what? He's got issues going on in his own life that brought him to that place. That guy's hurting. What is it about him? Can you imagine me reaching out to him and saying, hey, what can I do for you? That's what impacts people's lives. Because what would he expect? What would be the natural thing for Ron to expect from me if he did something to hurt me? He'd expect the rejection, wouldn't he? The retaliation, the revenge. If I don't come back with that kind of jars his grandma's preserves. He says, well, that's not a normal reaction. Tends to get his attention. That doesn't always work that way. I mean, some people are so... We're going to talk a lot about rejection in the coming series. Rejection has a huge impact on people's lives to the negative. It's difficult for them to accept the good things that come into their lives. Okay? But it's something that gets his attention. That's where the Lord can come in and go, now, because Dwayne, you're choosing to be concerned about what's going on with him instead of hating him about it. I now have the opportunity to start working in Ron's life. Awesome. Now good positive things are happening. I'm not turning a blind eye and going, whatever. That's an easy way to go because it protects me emotionally. It keeps me from hurting. But it's not about him. See? The resentment, it's all about, I got to get mine so I feel better. Sometimes even forgiveness is even about me. I'm getting mine. I want to feel better about this, so that's why I'll forgive you. I still say we're missing the point. This is really where we ought to be at. Okay, Mary?
I think we all have somebody in our lives either that we have hurt or that has hurt us tremendously.
Yes.
And with my thoughts on forgiving my mother-in-law, who was very, very, very mean, cruel. I came to the conclusion that I was expecting her to be more like my mother, and it was, an awful lot of it was my fault because I expected something that she couldn't give me.
Yes.
Am I wrong on that?
I don't think so at all. Oh, that's so huge.
However, because every time that we got together, there was something that she did that was really awful. I got to the point where I didn't want to be around her.
Yep.
And I didn't say to my husband, no, she cannot come. Or
Just I won't be there.
I just won't be there. Yeah. You know,
Started
I'll go
avoiding
visit
her.
somebody. Yeah.
Yep. Started avoiding her. That's a classic. That is an evidence of bitterness in a person's life, which we're going to get into in the next
So,
series.
but that was not. Was I off on that?
Well, I'm gonna keep from answering that question right now because, well, as far as it being a positive thing or a negative thing to do, well, I think it was as Cindy states, it was a survival tactic, which is fine.
Right.
You know, in trauma, we got to do things to get us to survive. Long term, I think there's a better and different way to handle that. It gets down to motivation. It's not so much the action; it's more or less the motivation. What's the reason for the action? Some people are so damaging and so hateful and so destructive that can't justify being around them at all. Okay? So you make the choice to not be with them because they're destructive and they bring nothing but that in your life. And when, it's like hanging out with an axe murderer. You're going to die at some point, so it's probably not a good idea to hang out with them. But what we've got to be careful of is that the bitterness causes us to avoid people. And even though we're not in their presence, they're still controlling us emotionally. That's where we've got to, and I can't answer that for you. You have to answer that for yourself. I can show you how to find the answer to that. That's what our next series is going to be about.
Now, I do recognize, like you with your grandfather, that she gave me a wonderful husband. Because Don was raised by her, and he is entirely the opposite. So, I mean...
There's always good things that come out of it.
Yeah.
It's not an easy balance to strike, for sure. No?
The forgiveness part. In all my 60 years, I have never felt that I needed to forgive anybody that somebody's done something grievous to me. I've always been the offender, if you will, where I needed forgiveness. But I never had that where I can't stand Richard. I never had that for anybody. And everybody gets busted on something or another. But like having an argument with another man or some person, after the argument's over, in about 2 minutes, to me, it's done. And I'm happy to help them off the ground. It's not a problem. But seriously, I've never. But no, that's kind of kidding around. But I've never had that thing where some people hurt me. I've done more of the hurt. And I know that I'm forgiven from the few people that I probably hurt in my life. But this is good if you're a believer. This only is viable if you're a believer, really. Sure. I mean, if you're an unbeliever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
No, that's true. But to a Christian, this makes some sense. To a non-believer, it's never going to happen.
Yeah, I think all the teaching of the Bible that Christ made about forgiveness was to the disciples, not to the crowds in general.
Yeah, but I'm just from what I'm saying here too, saying it's not for the believer.
Right. Yeah. Can't do this outside of Christ.
So am I weird with not having?
I don't think you're
anybody?
weird. I don't think you're weird.
Not about that.
Here's what I would challenge you on, though. Everybody, if you're a human being, you're susceptible to being hurt in your life or bitterness, and those things are normal to have.
It's true.
What may be the case, and so I would encourage you to search that out and find where that is. I'll help you do that in the next series.
I wouldn't know where to look.
You guys got to be here for the next series. Am I getting that point across for the next series? What I think though is, and since you asked, I would challenge you to look at yourself and ask yourself how hard Mel is on Mel. Because if tables are weighted on I'm the offender all the time, I'm the guy, well, maybe you're not the guy. Maybe you're making justifications for other people. Maybe it was them. But for whatever reason, you're deciding to take that burden on yourself. And so there's some issues there that I would encourage you to look at, and we'll go do some of that in the next series. So we get that. Okay, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you saw you raising your hand.
I know that, in our marriage, that my family, we tend to explode and get over it very quickly. And I'm not kidding you when I tell you we forget. We just forget.
Yeah.
And stuff. Whereas, my husband here, who's great, but his family are more grudge carriers. They're the ones that you wrong me, and he's got some sisters that won't speak to each other for years and years and years upon a time. And so he's carried that over. And it's hard for me because I'm like, hey, get over it, dude. I mean, you're not perfect either, but like I say, I love him, and that is something. So I just think if you're going to grow up in that type of atmosphere, if you just are able to forgive easier. And I was raised in a Christian home, too. So, but I'm not saying I'm the champion of forgiveness, because there are some things that
But here's the thing you gotta understand.
Not from him.
When personalities are explosive like that, and they do get over it quickly, they get over the circumstance quickly, their mind, mentally, we tend not to carry the memories. But emotionally, we do. Emotional memories are much stronger than mental memories are. And where we discover the damage that gets done, because a lot of times everybody wants to attribute all of this pain and suffering that we have in relationships to anger and resentment. And quite frankly, I'm just not that angry of a guy. I don't hold resentment toward people, grudges as you call it. Explode and get over quickly, all that kind of stuff. But bitterness likes to worm its way into people's lives, and it takes on the form of many other things. And its whole point is to be deceptive. It gets control of you, and you don't even know it's there. It comes in the most subtle ways. If the axe murderer comes running at you with the axe, what are you going to do? You're going to run and get away and protect yourself, right? But if he sneaks up behind you and cuts your throat, what chance do you have then? Same thing with bitterness. Bitterness comes running at you. If bitterness comes running at you going, hey, I'm bitterness and I'm here to take over your soul and control you emotionally and destroy your relationships, what would you do if you saw that coming? You would avoid it, right? So bitterness is much more deceptive because it's evil. And it'll sneak and worm its way into your soul in ways you don't even realize it's there until it's too late.